This is a general discussion about mental health. It is not to be interpreted as specific advice for a specific situation. Every situation is unique and requires advice to be tailored and adapted to that situation. All information in this broadcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional mental health services. If you or a loved one are experiencing mental health distress, please speak to a licensed professional in your area.
Living well. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change. Living well. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change.
Living Well takes a community. So remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share with a friend. Hey family, welcome to another episode of Living Well, where we attend to the mind, the heart, the body, and the soul. If you recall, last week we had an amazing conversation about family drama and the role that parents can play in actually stirring it up. And I think it's really good for us to talk about family drama and family conflict, to talk about how normal it is, to talk about how many of us experience it, and help us to kind of think about ways to deal with it and manage it. But I think equally as important, but less talked about, is the fact that families can heal, and the power in healing and the power in families moving in unison and with unity. Do you know how much of a dynamic change a family can have in their households and in their communities when they come together and work together on one accord? Well, today we want to talk about that healing. And you know what? It actually can start with you. Because if you begin to heal yourself, you can actually be a force in your family. But if you go into your family with your own brokenness, your family will continue to be broken. So stay tuned, get a pad, get a paper, sit back and relax, and let's begin to think about how we can be a healing force for those who we love. All right, so if you've been with us for a while, you know what time it is. It is time for the water cooler conversation. This is when we come out of our office, we stand around the water cooler, and we talk about those things that are hot, things that are current, and the things that you want to hear about. So what we're gonna do first is we have a little clip for you, something a little fun, and then we're gonna come back and talk about how our families seek to resolve conflict. Let's do it.
That's the way she makes it. Yeah. I make my dressing different. Okay. And I don't think we would be able to do that together. You see.
Okay.
He makes good dressing. But mine is made different and hers is different.
That's okay.
That's
That's
don't
okay.
say nothing. Now, wait a minute. Now, she can make her dress, just turn it off. I can make mine. And that's all it's to it. I'm not just trying to pull away and say,
if y'all want me, I can make a pan of dressing.
You can make a non-spicy. Mama makes a spicy.
We need 2 pans.
Can you make a spicy?
Yeah, I like
Mama.
Yeah, I don't make it spicy, so.
any way you want it, I can do it.
Can you add a little
You
spice
do us
to
a
it?
spicy.
Yeah.
You do us a non-spicy.
That's the end of that. That's good.
Okay, next.
Next.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me tell you about Nana. Nana said, mine is different, and I make mine spicy. Now hers be non-spicy.
And she was like, no, and I don't think we're gonna be able to do it. Together, exactly. But you know, did you notice the other? I want to say the other auntie. She's sitting there like, Lord have mercy. Like she don't want no parts of it. That is hilarious. But you know what? Isn't that how? That's how family deal with conflict.
That's the way healthy families deal with conflict.
That's healthy family dealing with conflict, because we need to have the difficult conversation. And the difficult conversation is, who's going to be responsible for the dressing?
Don't mess up the dressing, please. Don't do that.
Please don't mess up the dressing. But negotiating.
Exactly.
That's what they did.
Exactly.
We're going to compromise and we're going to negotiate.
And truth be told, you know, I love the fact that they were like, you know, Nana is like, I don't want to give up me making the dressing for my family.
Right.
Which I can understand. That's a huge passing of the torch when you are I'm going to say, like the matriarch of the family.
Yes.
So it's a huge passing up the torch. But the family came together and made space for someone in the next generation.
Yes.
If you looked at the one who's like, I'll make one pan, to also come alongside. And I think that level of compromise really demonstrates how the power in family when they work together.
Yes.
And it's so important. No one put Nana down. They honored her. They acknowledged her. And they also supported and acknowledged the other person in the family who was like, I can also do that. And they came to a great compromise. And I think that that's what makes this clip so beautiful and so heartwarming.
Yeah.
And something that I think our family should aspire to. There's no reason to get offended because someone's like, well, I can cook this or you cook that. Bring them both.
Bring them both.
You know?
Exactly. And be able to embrace and enjoy it all as a family. You could hear the person in the background saying, when she says, well, I make mine different. It's okay. It's okay. You got your way, I got mine. What matters more is that we all come together during the holiday and we can enjoy breaking bread together.
Exactly.
That's
and it's Thanksgiving.
It's Thanksgiving.
So we can handle 2 pans of dressing.
Absolutely.
We sure can. I mean, you know, like I tell my brother a couple of years ago, he decided he wanted to get in on the turkey wings. You know, making that some. I make the turkey, but he decided. But I let him bring his little dry turkey wings. I let him bring them. It's all right. You know, we gonna eat them. And we gonna carry on.
And what don't get eaten, I guess, gets taken home by somebody else, right?
Exactly. But I think a little, you know, giving room and space for families to come together and figure out those things that might be challenging. Making space for, because we can look at this and it's like, oh, it's just dressing. But with so many of the decisions and changes in families, so many of them are connected to deeper feelings.
Absolutely.
So it's not just dressing.
Right.
It is what I feel when my family eats my food.
Absolutely.
The status that it gives me in my family. It might even be the way that I show my family that I love you and that I'm taking care of you. So even making spaces for, we want to make this change, but let's acknowledge that it might be a small event or context, but it could have a huge meaning. Exactly.
Absolutely. I agree. Like you said, it doesn't matter what the topic is. Sometimes having difficult conversations, be it dressing or be it how to make a decision that might impact the rest of the family. The difficult conversations need to be had. And you know what? Sometimes we need to have them over food.
Right.
That might even be helpful.
Exactly. So. And with other folks, whoever that, we didn't see the person in the background said, that's okay.
Right.
You know, having that person who's able to be in the conversation to kind of mediate, can be objective and can say, you know what, there's space for both perspectives. There's space for both desires. I think that really is a beautiful way for us to think about going into this holiday season and meeting with our family. So with that, we thank this family for sharing their Thanksgiving planning conversation with us on social media. Shout out to them, praying that they have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season. So we're going to now transition. We're kind of picking up from where we left off last week on the episode about conflicts in families. We're going to continue to talk about conflicts in families, kind of part B with our resident blogger, J. Patrick Wise. So let's switch on over, bring in our expert, and continue to talk about families and how families can have actually healthy relationships. Let's do it. Well, welcome back, family. We are so happy that you are joining us for this segment of Living Well, where we are back with part B, talking about conflicts in the family. You remember J. Patrick Wise, our resident blogger. We had such an amazing conversation on the last episode. We decided to keep it going. We're talking about family. We're talking about family conflict. We're talking about drama and all of that. And really using the story of David to kind of highlight how you don't have to be perfect to be used, right, by God's hand, and that families don't have to be perfect but can work towards being healthy.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think one of the things that we didn't have a chance to fully explore was this idea of sometimes parents not acknowledging the trauma or the experiences of their children because it reminds them of their own trauma or their own experiences that they haven't dealt with. And we used the example of David seeing Bathsheba, knowing that she was married, calling her to the palace. He's in a position of power. She couldn't say no, right? And the Bible says he laid with her. So he took her, and how his kind of taking advantage of her mirrors when his son Amon, raped his sister, his half sister Tamar, and David was
quiet.
Exactly.
Yeah. That disqualification as the moral authority in your family. What happens in a family when the parents' prior actions or maybe even current actions disqualify them from being the standard of morality, and the children have to look elsewhere, perhaps even outside of the home, for what it means to be a quote unquote good person?
Yeah.
When your children know that you've fallen, when your children know that you've sinned, when your children know that you've intentionally, quote unquote, crossed the line.
Right.
And now they can't look to you as effectively as a moral authority. What kind of dynamics does that create in the home? What kind of dynamics does that create in the family?
Yeah. And I would add a caveat to that. When children know that you've fallen or sinned and you don't acknowledge it or repent or atone for it, right? That you don't acknowledge and have conversations and say, you know what I did wasn't the way to do it. And I want you to learn through me and from me and not repeat it. But David was silent about his own sin, right? He's so silent to cover it up. He had a husband killed. First he tried to trick him, go sleep with your wife so that the timeline, can kind of match up.
This is a great drama.
Right, exactly.
This could be a movie right now.
Exactly. So go sleep with him so he can get the time. When he was like, I can't do that. I got my people in the field. So he showed integrity.
Yes.
I got while my people are fighting, I can't lay with my wife and have a good time.
Right.
And so David is like, I'm still not going to, let me go put him in the front.
Right.
Put him in the front and still didn't acknowledge his wrongdoing and what he did. So it goes back to that idea of secrets. We're as sick as our secret. And so then the child has to go, look elsewhere when you see that there's this incongruence between that public face, right, and what's happening at home.
That's so strange, because that just my assessment is one of the problems that I see why people in my age group have walked away from the church.
I agree. I agree.
They see this discontinuity, this hypocrisy, if you will, between the parents' actions and conduct in church or around church people and the way they are at home. So what that translates to, going back to this kind of moral authority question, is that I can't trust you to be who you say you are at any place. And if that's the kind of God you say you serve, that God clearly has no impact on your life.
Right.
Because you can go in there and praise and lift holy hands and shout in tongues and come on and cuss me out and slap me.
Right.
So that Jesus has no impact in your life. So why should I go to a church? Clearly. I've been watching you I've been watching you my whole adolescence.
Exactly.
And it's Jesus has no impact.
And I think that causes, one of the things that it can do is cause a lot of bitterness. Cause a lot of bitterness and resentment. In the children and the other family members, when you sit by and watch, like Absalom was bitter. And for good reason. But nevertheless, still, just bitter and angry. And so when you can imagine what that can do to a family or to members of a family when they sit by and watch the heads do absolutely nothing or live this life of hypocrisy. And I think bitterness and resentment starts to set up.
Exactly. Like Absalom was going to kill Amnon. Kill him 2 years later. He plotted on it, set him up, had him killed. Just like David had his military kill your brother.
Exactly.
Amnon's like, I'm going to use my servants to kill my brother.
And wanted to kill his daddy too.
Exactly right. And David forgives him. But they never reconciled. How do you live a life looking for an apology or an admission of guilt or an admission of wrongdoing that may never come?
But the key, I think, that's important and that I think should be underscored is that sometimes the best you can do is forgive and not reconcile.
Right.
Talk about that.
Yes.
Because everyone deserves forgiveness, but not everyone deserves a place in your life.
Wow.
So forgiveness does not mean that now we have to be or we should be back in relation. Because I forgive you, that's what I'm doing on my part for me.
Yeah.
Me forgiving you does not mean that your behavior has changed.
Right.
Right.
So I might forgive you and you're still the same person who betrayed me or treated me unfairly or didn't protect me. So I'm forgiving you for me because that's what I'm called to do.
Right.
But if your behaviors haven't changed, if you haven't repented and committed to changing, then bringing you back into my life is not only dangerous, it's kind of stupid.
Yeah.
Can I say stupid?
Right. Yes, you can.
Okay, I can say
Foolish.
Foolish. Okay, that's it. Let's go biblical.
Yeah.
Foolish.
No, I like stupid. It's a translation that say stupid.
Yeah.
Somewhere out there, I know that.
Stupid on steroids.
Exactly.
Supersize stupid. Okay. But that's amazing because the Bible even talks about it. In Romans it says, as much as it depends upon you, get along peaceably with all men, implying that it might not be possible.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right?
Right.
Like, but
Okay.
to the degree that you can handle it, to the degree that it depends on you, live at peace with people. But meaning, sometimes people ain't gonna want to live at peace with you. And that might even be within your own family.
Right, exactly. Right. And me living at peace with you might be me not being around you.
Exactly.
Because I'm also a work in progress. Now, I want you to remember that. I'm a work in progress. Woo, don't stir it up. It's going to get stirred up. I need to go and stay over here. It's all right.
We can lay hands, but we're not talking about prayer.
Right. Sometimes.
Like, that's the thing. You don't know where God has brought people from.
Exactly.
Exactly.
You know?
As they say, I ain't been saved that long.
Exactly.
They used to say, I don't look like what I've been through.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly.
Right.
People have to learn. I can't remember which show it's from, but when we say forgive, but from a distance. Oh, Tyler Perry, I can hear him say from a distance, and that is so important because there are often those who confuse this idea of forgiveness. Especially if we're talking about a parent. You know, we going back to how difficult it is and how much you still want the longing and the attachment to that primary caregiver, to that attachment figure, even if they were the one that caused you the most pain. It's so difficult to let go of that. And yet sometimes it's required. I can forgive you, but I need you to still stay over there.
Right.
You know, forgiveness does not mean, like you said, having you in my circle and we're going to move forward as if like life is good. And sometimes, let's go back to that parent who may have the difficulty acknowledging their own abuse. That parent, when they have not acknowledged their own abuse and therefore it's difficult to acknowledge the abuse of their child, then for them and with forgiveness, they might very well be walking in the expectation. If you say you forgive me, then you will allow me to be in your life. And that parent can send that message to that child. This is what you're supposed to do. Not so.
Right.
Not so.
Right. I even see this, I got to go culture, contemporary culture. Like, I don't know if people know who Lil Scrappy is, right? Lil Scrappy, he's on a lot of like Love and Hip Hop, reality type shows. And he has a very estranged, really clouded relationship with his mom just based on how he was raised, being raised around prostitution, and drugs and things of that nature. And he confesses these things to her and how the environment in which he was reared and raised impacts his ability to connect in deep and meaningful ways, romantically, but also in terms of his just platonic relationships with other men. And he confesses this to her, and she is partly able to receive what he's saying, but also somewhat defensive about it. And I'm like, reconciliation, to your point earlier, can't take place if there's no acknowledgement, if there's no admission, if there's no confession.
Right.
We can't be reconciled if there's no confession of wrongdoing.
Right. And I would argue, let me get a little controversial here.
Do it.
I would argue, because the Bible calls for us to honor our mother and father.
Yeah.
I would argue that you can honor your parents without there being reconciliation.
Absolutely.
Talk about that.
I believe that you can honor them with, and I love this word, expectations. You know, when we are interacting or interfacing with someone who has failed us in some way or wronged us in some way, we have to manage our expectations of them. So you might say the expectations that I have of a mother or a father are that they are loving, that they are kind, that they are supportive, that they are there for me. That might be your expectation of a mother or a father. Then you have to look at the mother or the father that you have.
Right.
And your expectation has to be based on their ability.
Right.
And they might not have that ability. And sometimes we get hurt because we are expecting something from someone that they don't have the ability to perform, to do.
That's so good.
And so I can honor you without saying, I can honor you by checking on you, by making sure that you're okay, by praying for you. That doesn't mean that we have to go out to dinner and go shopping and that I have to let you babysit my kids and you're an abuser. I don't have to do any of those things.
Right.
I can love you. I can forgive you. I can pray for you. You know, I can check on you by phone, reach out, you know, when I feel it, and get off the phone. We had an episode we talked about you got your keys.
All right now.
Exactly.
All right.
Ooh,
All right.
Ooh, this has been good.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
To some degree. It's been good to some degree.
Yeah.
And get off, and I don't have to disrespect you. I don't have to match energies. Just because you get loud, I don't have to get loud. Just because you cuss, I don't have to cuss.
Right.
So I can honor you in those ways without trying to beat out of you, be my mother or be my father.
That's amazing. That's something that was transformative in my own life. I like to think about it in terms of Amazon, right? People have an emotional warehouse, so to speak. And if I come to you requesting something that you don't have in the inventory, I gotta manage how mad I am about that.
Yes.
If it was never in
good.
the inventory,
That's good.
then how foolish am I to continue to request it?
Right.
It's not in stock.
Right.
And you don't go to Target and be like, why y'all don't have toilet paper? They're like, sir, it's not in stock. Me staying in the store and yelling at them to bring toilet paper is not going to make it
That's right.
That's
appear.
That's right.
But now I can manage, to your point, expectations. Because that's expectation is, so disappointment is the difference between expectation and experience, right? What I believe is going to happen or what I want to happen versus what actually happened is the degree to which I am or am not disappointed.
Exactly.
That really helps with it.
You know, that is, I can say, for me personally, that became really clear. There was a season in my life when my dad and I had, you know, I felt failed by him. And our relationship was really tense. And wanting the connection, constantly kind of going back. And I kept being met with this door being shut in my face. And I'll never forget the day when I finally said, Lord, you said to honor thy mother and thy father. And I said, and that's what I will continue to do. But I don't have to keep walking through this door that's going to be shut in my face. Yeah. So I can honor him without continuing to walk through this door. I realized in that moment, I don't have to keep reaching.
Right.
And at that moment, I said, God, you said you'd be a father to the fatherless. Now, I knew I had a father, but in that moment, I needed God to be the father to me that my biological father was not able to be. And I'm going to be honest, Dr. Erica, sometimes they're not willing. And we have to be okay with that, too.
Yeah.
I can't expect something from you, one, when you don't have the capacity to give to me, but you might not even have the desire to give me.
Right.
And that's painful. But I got to be okay with that.
And the hard part about that, Dr. Lark, is I can't let that be a commentary on my own value and worth.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
The fact that my parent rejects me or my parent is unable to provide something essential as or foundational as love, acceptance, and embrace, if you will. That cannot be a commentary on my value, on my worth, on my dignity. Because I'll live that out and show up in every other place I go, to your point that we discussed a little while ago, seeking that out.
Right.
Because I'll go to some extremes seeking validation, seeking affirmation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That could be self-interest to me.
Yeah.
And also, I could get into a relationship with my parent where I'm trying to punish them for what they didn't do.
Absolutely.
Right? So I'm mad at them. I'm putting them down. Every time I'm with them, I'm talking about what you didn't do and are calling out their faults or their frailties, all of those things. So now I'm in constant conflict because I'm trying to pull from them an apology, for them not to be defensive, for them to acknowledge that they did not take care of me, that they did not protect me. And so now I'm in conflict with them. I'm in conflict warring within myself, and that can't help but bleed into other relationships that I have.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It would bleed into other relationships. And I think the beauty, at least for my life, my experience with my father, was that there was acknowledgement. The acknowledgement came later. There was a little bit of distance there. Right. And then it was probably about 2 years later. And then the acknowledgement came. And with and you know, acknowledgement is important. I was fortunate enough to get it because then that set forth the space for reconciliation and healing. And, you know, we had a really good 8 years before he passed away. But there are many who don't get that opportunity. And so, to your point when you were talking about forgiveness, how important it is to be able to not allow that position to really kind of inform and become your identity, if you will. But learning to forgive, and even if we forgive from a distance, we may or may not be able to have this conversation and have reconciliation. Right. And sometimes we might be able to, but I think it's so important to, it's the forgiveness that allows us to move from that place of tragedy and or trauma, if you will, so that we can kind of move forward and live healthy lives and possibly engage in healthy conflict, you know, later on down the line in other relationships.
And it's so powerful. I think, you know, it seems like our conversation is coming to kind of this natural transition to talking about all of the ways that trauma and conflict can erode a family and the family's connection to. There is the possibility or potential for there to be healing and reconciliation. And it's so powerful when a family can come together and work as a unit, work in unison to support each other, to love each other, and to move the family forward. Like, I don't think there's anything more powerful than that.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Like, one family comes to mind. We're talking about how family dynamics show up in Scripture.
Right.
Numbers 27, the daughters of Zelophehad or Zehoshaphat, depending on how you read that thing. It's five women.
You said Numbers.
Yeah, the book of Numbers.
The book of Numbers. That's over in the Old Testament, one of the first few.
You got to blow the dust off.
Come on, Numbers.
Right. We go to the New Testament and we get in the gospel and I'm like, okay, I'm comfortable.
Right, exactly.
You go to Numbers, right?
Okay.
So I think, 27.
Okay.
What's happened is their father has died, and they're very clear to say he died of his own sin. In other words, the reason he died ain't got nothing to do with us. But the problem they have is, normally, as the law states, inheritance are passed to the firstborn son.
Yes.
This man had 5 daughters, meaning he had no son to pass his inheritance to. So the question now becomes, where does this inheritance go? These 5 sisters look at each other and like, hey, we got to do something. Because the name of our father, the name of our family has to continue on, even though there's no son, even though we have no brothers. So brilliant women. And by the way, they're from the clan of Manasseh, which means they're half African. So in my mind, whenever I read the story, I'm like, these are black women, and I like to cast them.
Black girls rock.
Little black girl magic, little black girls rock right there in the Bible, in the early stages. Right. So I'm like, I like to cast them. So like, one of them might be Viola, one of them might be Serena, one of them might be Venus, one of them might be Oprah, something like that. I'm like, so I see them like, no, girl, we got to do this. We got to do this. So who gonna talk to Moses? I'll go talk to Moses. So they have a conversation amongst themselves. Then they say, hey, Moses, we need to talk to you. Basically, what is happening in this nation ain't fair. And we need you to go to God and find out what God wants you to do, and you tell us what God say, because we deserve an inheritance. Because just because our father didn't have a son, it's not fair that we don't get to have a share of the inheritance. So Moses was like, you know what? You're right. Let me talk to God. I'm gonna go up on the mountain, see what God say. I'll come back, tell you what he said. Moses goes up, prays, talks to God. God's like, you know what? They're right. They're right. The women, what the women have said is true. So Moses comes back to the women and says, God says y'all right on point. So because of their family dynamic, their ability to come together, to band together as one in a crisis, forever alters the course of the nation of Israel, of the people of Israel. Not because it was some kind of oversight or intentional neglect, but instead it was like, no, this is an opportunity for God to demonstrate his love through all people. God is saying, I made man and woman in my image. And the way that this is going, I can't forget how important and how special my daughters are. And that starts in a family.
Wow. So those 5 sisters were the first women to speak truth to power.
Yes.
They spoke truth to power and changed law.
Yes.
They changed law that was written in stone. It ain't like now we got computers. You can just alt and delete.
Right.
No, he had to go get a new tablet.
Exactly right. Like, let me go to Target. See if they got tablets in there. I got to chisel this out.
Exactly.
So now I got to add an amendment to the law. But that idea that a family can bond together in hardship and say something needs to happen. Something needs to change. The way things have been going aren't working anymore.
Right. The power of siblings coming together, I think is so powerful. I often say that it's so tragic to me when siblings don't get along or when there's conflict, because truly there are no other people on earth that have lived the majority of your experience inside of a household, in a community, experiences. There are no other people who can relate in that same way, right? And your siblings have so much potential to be your first and your forever friends, right? Your first and your forever supporters. And so when there's conflict there, it truly weakens the entire family system.
Wow.
But there is, when we think about the hope, right? There is hope that there can be reconciliation, there can be healing, and families can join together and change law, change community, speak to God in a way that God will say, you know what, y'all right, let me go and fix this thing. I think that's so powerful.
Yes, wholeheartedly. I often think about I definitely believe it's powerful because that's how my siblings and I are. I mean, we're super close. We couldn't even fight each other. My mother would whoop us if we got into it. We couldn't fight each other. So I have the beauty of being able to experience that. And my sister and I, the sister next to me, we're 8 months apart. So we have lived, our experiences, like we've just lived this life together. Yeah. However, there are family members, I think about the tragedy of those who don't have that, connection. They don't have their family, especially when it's just amongst siblings and the parents are no longer there. I see families that are literally destroyed because whatever the crisis is happening, it has come and divided the family, as opposed to the siblings being able to come together and, like you said, handle the crisis. And we often, families, we say nothing brings families together and tear them apart like weddings and funerals. That's when you really see, the dynamic. When we say that and we laugh about that, but again, like you were saying earlier, it really is it can create opportunities. Mm-hmm. It can create opportunities. I think sometimes when we see situations like that, you can see all of the conflict and the bickerness, but it's also opportunity to come together. It's also opportunity to forgive and to engage in forgiveness and maybe start with small conversations if you can. I mean, there are opportunities. So for all the siblings out there that are disjointed for whatever reason, I think it's an opportunity to come back together.
Absolutely.
Most definitely, I think the family can be healthy. And I think if siblings would, it's kind of going back to David, which we talked about last episode and a little bit this one, going back to this idea of the children taking their lead on how they're treating their sibling from their parent. When the siblings grow up, beginning to reflect on, why do I feel this way about my sister or my brother?
Right.
Is it really our relationship, or am I letting things bleed over from our parents? From their relationship with our parent? Am I letting that bleed over? Is that somehow muddled there? And can I have a relationship with my sibling on our terms? But sometimes there can be jealousy. Well, mama treated you different, or there could be, you got more than I did. Well, that has nothing to do with you two. That was how your parents chose to parent, but now I have some ought against you because I didn't like what they did for you or didn't do for me. So I think as we become adults, we're responsible for the ways that we move throughout the world and how we have relationships, and we're responsible for healing.
Right.
We're responsible for saying, I want to do something different. I'm an adult, I'm grown, I can make decisions and choices about my life. And you can make a choice to say, I want to heal and experience the power
Yeah.
that can come from our family being healthy.
Wow.
I like that she said grown folks, because that's what grown folks do.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
we don't no longer continue to engage in the stuff that happened when we were kids. Grown folks, when we become adults, we make grown folk decisions, and that means let's have a conversation, and I choose healing.
That's
I
so
like
good.
that.
I got a question, and maybe I'm kind of standing in the stead of somebody, because I'm an only child, so I may not, I don't have this experience, but I'm loving hearing it, and I'm actually seeing it happen in my aunts and uncles coming together and kind of reestablishing connection and things of that nature, and that's been cool to see. But let's say I want to be the catalyst for change in my family. Let's say I want to be the person who at least attempts to begin trying to foster some sense of reconciliation where there traditionally has been division in my family. What should I do? What should I consider? What kind of thoughts should I begin to have? What questions should I ask myself maybe? If I'm going to be the person to call the family together and say, hey, something needs to change. Hey, something needs to heal. What should I think about?
When I think about that, I think one of the things that's important is to consider thinking about what it is that you want, what you are looking for, and also managing your expectations from your other siblings.
That's good.
I think that it would be important to talk about the value of being able to, come back together and connect, and at the same time, manage the expectation that the siblings may not be there.
Yeah.
And so...
By be there, you mean be where you are?
Be where you are, yes,
Got it.
yes. Be where you are, and because it's not something that you can force. But I think being able to encourage the siblings and model that, if you will, model the forgiveness. I think that's probably one of the things to keep in mind. Is like, okay, because you can't make it happen. You want it to be natural, you want it to be organic, you want it to be, congruent, and everybody being able to acknowledge everyone in their different space, I think is one of the top things to consider.
That's good.
That's what I'll say.
That's good.
And I'll follow that up by saying, don't do it alone.
That's good.
So if you know that there are conflict, let's say between your siblings, is there a family member or someone who's close to the family, what we call fictive kin, right? Like, Aunt Susie, but she was just mama's best friend.
Yeah.
She's not really, right?
Yeah.
So if there's someone who everyone respects, who can speak truth and have people sit down and shut up
like
and
a
listen.
mediator.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But who has that kind of respect and authority in the family to kind of be in the middle and help to facilitate conversations, who's able to call out like, okay, everybody has some wrong in this situation. So I would say, if you know that you want to begin that, identify someone who could be in there with you. I also say that there's a risk, and that risk is vulnerability, because vulnerability can be met with rejection. But you have to be willing to take the chance to be vulnerable some small way, and to open up the potential for someone to also be vulnerable back. So I would say, an olive branch could be just saying, we've been fighting for too long and I want my family. Can we start?
Yeah.
And that takes vulnerability, because some people can be like, nah.
You might get cussed out.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. But going in love and having someone with you and managing your expectations. They might not be where you are.
Right.
But I would say, if there's been conflict, having another person there, and not someone who's going to be on quote unquote your side.
Right.
I mean, someone who can truly be neutral and objective.
Yeah.
Neutral and objective, and can come in and offer some balance.
Yeah.
And you also, if you're saying you wanna be that catalyst, you also have to be ready to hear where you fell short.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
As well. You have to, but it should start with a conversation.
Right.
And you saying, I'm going to be the one that's going to be vulnerable, but also managing your expectation. You don't want to put it all out on the line.
Right.
you want to, you want to jump in feet first. You want to, put a toe.
Find yourself by yourself.
Right, exactly. You want to do a toe. You want to put a toe in the water. Put a toe in the water. But, having that hope, praying, praying, God can change hard hearts, and he can mend broken hearts, and he can heal, families. So really praying and standing on the word and being congruent in who you are.
Right.
So that the family can see, and you beginning to make changes. I often say, bring it into current kind of nomenclature. I've said before, I dislike this match energy. I'm a match energy.
Right.
I'm not matching energy.
Right.
I can have my own feelings that are outside. You can be angry. If I'm not angry, I'm not. You can't make me angry.
Yeah.
I know I have my own energy.
Why would I allow you to do that?
Exactly.
Right.
Why am I giving you that kind of power?
Like I've outsourced responsibility for my own emotions. You made me mad.
Exactly.
Did I?
You're right.
Your voice go up. Did I?
Me?
Yeah.
Was it me? So I would say, praying and really being resolute in maintaining your peace and trying to create peace.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
When one part of the system changes, the entire system has to shift.
Absolutely.
It might fight to get back to homeostasis or where it was before.
Yeah.
But it's hard to argue by yourself.
It sure is.
But if you used to arguing with me, and then one day I'm like, I don't want to argue.
Right.
And you, and I'm like, yeah, that might be true, but I want to find a different way. Like, at some point, you're going to have to stop.
You would be scratching
you don't
your
understand.
head.
I practiced my argument in the car.
Right.
On the way here. You was going to say this, and then I was going to say this back, and I was going to say this, and I was going to put the knife in right here.
I know.
So now you're saying, I don't want to argue. It's like, wait.
Yeah, exactly.
Scratching my head. I gotta come up with something
I didn't consider that when I was at the stoplight.
Now I have to figure out something completely different
Yeah.
to do.
One thing changes, everything changes.
Everything changes.
That's good.
Everything changes. So I think this is coming to a natural close.
Naturally.
So, J. Patrick, what do you want to lead the people with?
I think that we all should know that God's desire is for us to thrive. Right? Jesus says, I came that you might have life and have that life abundantly. So the life that we are to have in God is not about bias. It's not just inhaling and exhaling. It's the desire that we thrive holistically. Beloved, I pray above all that you would prosper and be in health even as your soul prospers. It's holiday season. Let your soul prosper.
All right.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, I can't say it any better than that. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of Living Well. Remember, go to normalizehelp.org for resources and also to have some of your questions answered. And until we see you next time, we pray that you are living well. For more information and resources, be sure to check us out at normalizehelp.org. And you can always email us at livingwell@faithfamily.org to get a question answered or to tell us a story. You never know, your question might make it to air or be the subject of one of our episodes. See you next week.
It's not too late to change, it's time to be the change. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. It's not too late to change, now it's time to change. Now it's time to change, now it's time to change. Now it's time to change, time to change, time to change.